On a blackened wall in Rotherham, a painting hangs untouched. The house around it has burned to the ground, but the boy's tearful eyes remain pristine. The firefighter who finds it knows how fire works. He knows what it destroys. This makes no sense. Within weeks, reports flood in from across Britain. House after house, fire after fire, and always, the same witness survives. The painting never burns. People begin tearing it from their walls. Some try to destroy it and fail. A tabloid newspaper collects the testimonies, builds the case, and finally offers a solution. Send us your cursed paintings. We'll burn them for you. On Halloween 1985, thousands of prints arrive. The bonfire is lit. A nation exhales. But the question remains, what actually happened? September 4th, 1985. The Hall family's home in Rotherham has burned to the ground. The structure collapsed inward, the roof caved, and everything inside turned to ash. When the flames were finally extinguished, firefighter Peter Hall walked through what used to be his parents' home. The air smelled like char and wet soot. The floor was unrecognizable, but on one blackened wall, untouched by the fire, hung a print of a crying child. The boy in the painting stared straight ahead. His eyes were enormous, glistening with tears. His face was pale, his expression heartbreaking. Peter Hall had seen dozens of house fires in his career. He knew how flames moved, what they consumed, what they left behind. This made no sense. Everything else in the room was destroyed. The painting was pristine. The Hall family didn't call it luck, they called it a curse. For months before the fire, they'd been plagued by bad fortune, illness, accidents, financial strain. They'd blamed the painting then, half joking. Now their home was gone, and the only thing that survived was the boy's face. The Sun newspaper ran the story the same day. The headline read, "Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy." This is where the case begins. Within days, the reports started flooding in. A woman in Manchester wrote to the paper. Her flat burned 6 months ago. The crying boy print in her hallway was the only thing that didn't burn. A man in Leeds said the same thing happened to his mother's house. Another letter arrived from Birmingham, then another from Glasgow. Each story followed the same pattern. House fire, total destruction. One object survives, the painting of the crying child. The Sun published these testimonies one after another. The paper didn't treat them as a coincidence. It treated them as evidence. By the second week of September, the story had metastasized into something much larger than a single house fire in Rotherham. This was now a nationwide phenomenon. Readers across Britain were checking their own walls, suddenly uneasy. The painting had been harmless for years. Cheap, sentimental, a bit tacky. Now it felt like something else. The key to the story's credibility was Peter Hall. He wasn't a superstitious man. He was a firefighter, trained to understand fire scientifically. When he said the painting's survival was inexplicable, it carried weight. The Sun understood this. They quoted other firefighters. One station officer told the paper, "I have seen many fires where the crying boy painting has remained unscathed. It's a mystery." The testimony of professionals transformed urban legend into something that felt documented, verifiable, real. By late September, the panic was no longer contained to letters and articles. People were tearing the paintings from their walls. Some tried to burn them in their gardens and failed. The prints smoldered but wouldn't catch fire, which only deepened the fear. Others took them to rubbish tips. Thousands wrote to the Sun, asking what they should do. The newspaper had successfully convinced a nation that a mass-produced print of a sad child was responsible for destroying homes. By late September, the case felt airtight, and the public needed to know, who painted this? The signature on the print said Giovanni Bragolin. But there was no Giovanni Bragolin. No records, no gallery showings, no obituary. Another version of the print was signed Franco Seville. That name also led nowhere. The artist had hidden behind pseudonyms, and the anonymity was more than suspicious. It was sinister. If the painter was innocent, why the aliases? Why the secrecy? Into this vacuum, a legend rushed in to fill the silence. The story went like this. The artist was a disillusioned painter living in post-war Europe. either Venice or Spain, depending on who told it. He made his living painting portraits of orphans at a local children's home. The most famous subject, the boy in the painting, was a child named Don Bonillo. Some versions of the story called him Diablo or Diablillo, the little devil. The boy's parents had died in a fire. He was considered unlucky, cursed. A local priest warned the artist to stay away from him, but the painter ignored the warning. He painted the boy's portrait. Shortly after, the artist's studio burned down. Everything was destroyed except the painting of Don Bonillo. The artist, now terrified, cast the boy out. The orphan died soon after in a car crash. His vengeful spirit, the legend said, was trapped in the painting. Every reproduction carried the curse. Every home that hung it was marked. This story spread faster than the fires themselves. It was perfect. It had tragedy, defiance, supernatural punishment, and a lingering threat. The crying boy wasn't just sad. He was dangerous. His tears were not a plea for help. They were a warning. The legend was also completely false. There was no Don Bonillo, no cursed orphan, no priest, no studio fire. The entire narrative was fabricated, stitched together from tabloid gossip and public anxiety. But by the time the truth was revealed, it no longer mattered. The fiction had become the official origin story. The real artist was a man named Bruno Amadio. He was born in Venice in 1911, studied at the Venice Academy, and moved to Spain after World War II. He painted under pseudonyms because he was a commercial artist, not a fine artist. The Crying Boy series was kitsch, mass-market sentimentality designed to sell cheaply in department stores. He painted dozens of these images, boys, girls, all with the same oversized, tearful eyes. The style was popular in the 1960s and 70s. It was meant to evoke pity, not terror. Bruno Amadio died in 1981 in Padua, 4 years before the panic began. He never knew his work would become infamous. He never knew a nation would fear it. The man who painted the crying boy had no idea he was painting a curse. But the Sun wasn't interested in Bruno Amadio. The newspaper was interested in the story, and the story was bigger than the truth. By October 1985, the paper had received thousands of letters from readers begging for help. People were terrified. They wanted the painting out of their homes, but they were afraid to touch it. They'd heard the stories. People who tried to burn it and couldn't. People whose bad luck only worsened after they bought the print. The Sun positioned itself as both the source of the panic and its solution. If the painting was cursed, the newspaper would lift the curse. They invited readers to mail in their prints. The paper would destroy them on behalf of the nation. It was a masterstroke of tabloid theater. The same publication that fanned the flames now offered to extinguish them. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of paintings arrived at the Sun's offices in London, wrapped in brown paper, stuffed in envelopes, delivered by terrified families who wanted nothing more to do with the crying boy. The newspaper organized a bonfire for Halloween. The timing was deliberate, a night already associated with ghosts, witches, and exorcism. The symbolism was medieval, but the spectacle was modern. The paper didn't just report the curse. It orchestrated its destruction. Every letter sent to the Sun was another piece of evidence. Every testimony was another confirmation. The tabloid understood something essential. People needed something to blame. A faulty wire, a dropped cigarette, the random chaos of a house fire. These explanations were too frightening because they were too meaningless. But a cursed painting? That was something you could see, touch, and destroy. It gave you a focal point for your grief and anger. It gave you control. The Sun recognized this need and fed it. The newspaper didn't create the anxiety. It just gave it a face. On the evening of October 31st, 1985, staff from the Sun piled the prints into a bonfire. Some reports said it happened on the building's rooftop. Others said it was in a car park. Either way, the fire was lit. The flames consumed the paintings, and the newspaper photographed the event. The images ran in the next day's edition. Thousands of crying boys burning together. The public exhaled. The ritual was complete. The curse, it seemed, was over. People who had lived in fear for weeks felt relief. The painting that had hung in their living rooms, that had watched them with those enormous, tearful eyes, was gone. The bad luck would end. The fires would stop. The nation had purged itself. But the case wasn't closed. Not yet. 25 years later, in 2010, BBC Radio 4's Punt PI decided to revisit the story. The producers wanted to know, was there ever really a curse? They consulted fire experts, material scientists, and folklorists. They examined the evidence methodically, as if it were a crime scene. The first question was the most obvious. Why did the painting survive the fires? The answer was embarrassingly simple. The prints were hung with a string. String is cheap and highly flammable. In a house fire, the string burns first. When the string burns, the painting falls face down onto the floor. And the floor, in a house fire, is the safest place to be. Heat rises. Flames climb walls and ceilings. The floor is the last part of the room consumed. A painting lying flat is shielded from the worst of the radiant heat, but that alone didn't explain the painting's pristine condition. The answer lay in the materials. These were cheap reproductions glued onto high-density hardboard. Compressed wood fiber, dense and resistant to ignition. It doesn't burst into flames like paper or canvas. It smolders and chars, but doesn't combust easily. Many of these prints were also coated with fire-retardant varnish. The varnish wasn't applied for safety. It was applied to protect the image and make the surface easy to wipe clean. But it created a barrier between the flames and the image beneath. The back of the painting might scorch. The frame might blacken. But the boy's face, protected by chemistry and physics, remained untouched. The final piece of the puzzle was confirmation bias. By 1985, the crying boy prints had been sold in hundreds of thousands of homes across Britain. They were ubiquitous. Some of those homes would inevitably experience fires. But no one wrote to the Sun about the thousands of prints that did burn. No one reported the millions of house fires that didn't involve the painting at all. People only remembered the hits, the cases where the painting survived. The misses were invisible. The curse was never supernatural. It was a collision of cheap materials, basic physics, and a public desperate to find patterns in chaos. The rational explanation doesn't kill the legend. Today, the crying boy is more famous for its curse than for its art. The painting has become a permanent fixture in British folklore, sitting alongside Annabelle the doll and Robert the doll in the global catalog of cursed objects. Collectors hunt for the prints online. The painting's value has been inverted. It's no longer desirable because it's beautiful. It's desirable because it's supposedly cursed. People buy it for the story it carries, not the image it displays. The boy's meaning has been permanently rewritten. The Don Bonillo legend, completely fabricated, is now repeated as fact across paranormal forums and blogs. The internet has amplified what the tabloids began, and the fiction has calcified into accepted history. Bruno Amadio painted crying children because tears sold. He wanted to evoke pity, to create something sentimental for working-class homes. The man who painted the crying boy had no idea he was painting a ghost story. The case is closed, but the story refuses to die. The painting survived the fires because of string, hardboard, and varnish. But the legend survives because of something else. Because a nation under stress needed a villain it could see, touch, and destroy. The real curse wasn't in the painting, it was in the fear itself, and that fear is still burning.